Welcome back, dear friends, to our quiet corner of history and wonder. Tonight, we are going to step back much further than we usually dare. We are going to travel through time, past the great empires of Rome and Greece, past the golden sands of Egypt, and even past the invention of writing itself. We are looking for the very first sparks of the human imagination. When we think of ancient, our minds often settle on the Great Pyramid of Giza. It is a monument that feels eternal, built around 4,500 years ago. But the pyramid is a relative newcomer in the story of human creativity. Tonight, we are visiting 10 masterpieces that were already ancient by the time the first stone was laid for the Pharaoh Khufu. These are works of art that survived ice ages, the shifting of continents, and the rise and fall of entire species. As you settle into your most comfortable space, let the sounds of the modern world fade away. Imagine the air growing cooler and smelling of damp earth and wood smoke. We are entering the long, deep night of prehistory. Here, in the flickering light of oil lamps and campfires, we will find that our ancestors were not just survivors. They were dreamers, builders, and poets of the stone and bone. Let us begin our journey into the mysteries that predate the pyramids. 1. The Lion Man of Hohensteinstadel, circa 40,000 years ago. We begin our journey 40,000 years ago, deep in the Swabian Jura of modern-day Germany. The world is locked in the grip of the last ice age. To survive here, humans must contend with mammoths, cave bears, and the most feared predator of the tundra, the cave lion. In a limestone cave known as Hohensteinstadel, a prehistoric artist sat by a fire and began a project that would take over 300 hours of meticulous labor. Using only flint tools, this artist carved a figure from the tusk of a woolly mammoth. This is the Lion Man. It stands nearly a foot tall, depicting a creature with the muscular, upright body of a human and the powerful, alert head of a cave lion. This is not just a carving of an animal. It is the oldest known depiction of a mythical creature. It is the first physical evidence of the anthropomorphic imagination, the ability to conceive of things that do not exist in the physical world. Imagine the focus required to carve mammoth ivory with stone tools. The ivory is hard and brittle, yet the artist managed to give the Lion Man a sense of grace and power. The figure's left arm is marked with 7 parallel lines, suggesting a tribal marking or perhaps a ritual counting of time. Why did they create it? Was it a deity, a guardian spirit, or perhaps a shaman caught in the middle of a transformation? By the time the pyramids were built, the Lion Man had already been resting in the dark of its cave for 35,000 years. It reminds us that even at the very beginning, humans were reaching for the spiritual and the supernatural. 2. The Venus of Willendorf, circa 28,000 to 25,000 years ago. We travel now to the banks of the Danube River in modern Austria about 28,000 years ago. In the soft, golden light of a Paleolithic afternoon, someone is holding a small, round stone. It is oolitic limestone, a material not found in this region, meaning it was likely carried across the mountains from northern Italy. This stone has been transformed into one of the most famous icons of prehistory, the Venus of Willendorf. This tiny figurine, barely 4 inches tall, is a masterpiece of stylized form. She is a woman of exaggerated abundance, large breasts, a rounded belly, and powerful thighs. Her face is completely hidden, covered by a detailed beehive pattern that might represent braided hair or a woven cap. She has no feet, suggesting she was never meant to stand on a shelf, but rather to be held in the palm of a hand, or perhaps tucked into the earth during a ritual. When we look at the Venus, we are looking at the Paleolithic ideal of survival and fertility. In a world where food was scarce and life was fragile, abundance was a miracle. She was originally tinted with red ochre, the color of life and blood. By the time the first pharaohs walked the Nile, this figurine had been a sacred object for over 20,000 years. She is a silent testament to the ancient reverence for the feminine and the mystery of life's continuation. Feel the smooth, cool surface of the stone in your mind and recognize the connection between this tiny object and the grand monuments that would follow millennia later. 3. The Hall of the Bulls in Chauvet Cave, circa 32,000 to 30,000 years ago. Deep in the Ardèche region of southern France, there is a door that very few people are allowed to open. It leads into the Chauvet Cave, a subterranean cathedral of art that was sealed by a rockfall for over 20,000 years until its rediscovery in 1994. Within these galleries, we find paintings so sophisticated that they shattered our understanding of primitive art. The Hall of the Bulls features massive, sweeping frescoes of animals that are no longer found in Europe: woolly rhinoceroses, lions, panthers, and mammoths. Unlike later cave art that focused on animals of the hunt, Chauvet is dominated by predators. The artists used the natural contours of the cave walls to give the animals volume and movement. By the flickering light of a torch, a painted rhinoceros appears to charge, its horns overlapping to suggest a sequence of motion, an ancient form of animation. What makes Chauvet so mysterious is its antiquity. These paintings were created 32,000 years ago. To put that in perspective, the artists of the famous Lascaux Cave were closer in time to the building of the pyramids than they were to the artists of Chauvet. The humans who entered these deep chambers weren't just decorating their living space, they were performing a sacred act in the underworld. There are footprints of a young child and a wolf preserved in the soft clay of the floor, walking side by side. As you imagine the silence and the cool, damp air of the cave, realize that these masterpieces were already ancient history long before the first civilizations of Mesopotamia ever stirred. 4. The stone circles of Göbekli Tepe, circa 11,500 years ago. We move forward to a pivotal moment in the human story, the end of the last ice age. On a high ridge in southeastern Turkey sits Göbekli Tepe, often called the 0 point in time. Built nearly 12,000 years ago, this site is a massive complex of T-shaped stone pillars arranged in circles. This is the oldest known monumental architecture in the world, and it was built by people who had not yet discovered farming, pottery, or metal. The pillars are monoliths, some standing nearly 20 feet tall and weighing over 10 tons. They are carved with incredible high-relief sculptures of lions, scorpions, vultures, and snakes. The pillars themselves are abstract human forms, with arms and hands carved into their sides and belts tied around their waists. They stand like silent stone giants watching over the landscape. For decades, historians believed that humans only began to build monuments after they settled down to farm. Göbekli Tepe flipped that narrative upside down. It suggests that it was the urge to gather for ritual and art that forced humans to stay in one place, eventually leading to agriculture. By the time the pyramids were built, Göbekli Tepe had already been abandoned and deliberately buried by its creators for over 6,000 years. It is a mystery wrapped in stone, a temple built before the concept of a city even existed. Imagine the thousands of people coming together to drag these stones across the hills, driven by a vision that predates the dawn of civilization. 5. The Bimbetka Rock Shelters, circa 30,000 to 10,000 years ago. Our final stop in Part 1 takes us to the Vindhya Range in central India. Here, amidst massive black boulders and dense forest, are the Bimbetka Rock Shelters. These caves contain a continuous record of human life and art that spans from the Upper Paleolithic all the way to the medieval period. The oldest paintings here are estimated to be 30,000 years old. The art of Bimbetka is a vivid, colorful diary of a lost world. We see stick figure humans dancing, hunting with bows, and riding on the backs of elephants and horses. There are massive, vibrant red bison and boars that seem to pulse with energy. The artists used natural pigments, manganese, hematite, and wooden charcoal, mixed with animal fat and plant juices. These colors have bonded so deeply with the rock that they have survived the harsh Indian monsoons for tens of thousands of years. The most moving part of Bimbetka is the sense of continuity. One generation would paint their story, and thousands of years later, another group would add theirs directly on top or beside it. It is a collaborative masterpiece that took 30 millennia to complete. By the time the Egyptian Old Kingdom was rising, the auditorium cave at Bimbetka had already seen 20,000 years of human history. It reminds us that art is our most enduring form of communication. It is how we tell the future that we were here, that we danced, and that we survived. 6. The Lascaux Cave frescoes, circa 17,000 years ago. We continue our journey in the Vézère Valley of France, at a site often called the Sistine Chapel of Prehistory. While Chauvet represents the dawn of cave art, Lascaux represents its absolute peak. Created around 17,000 years ago, these paintings were produced by the Magdalenian people, a culture that had mastered the art of survival in the waning years of the Ice Age. The most iconic section of the cave is the Great Hall of the Bulls. Here, 4 immense black bulls, some over 17 feet long, appear to stampede across the white calcite walls. The scale is staggering. To paint at this height, the artists had to construct wooden scaffolding, the sockets for which are still visible in the stone. They didn't just use fingers or simple brushes, they used primitive airbrushes, blowing powdered pigment through hollow bird bones to create soft, blended gradients of color. What makes Lascaux a mystery is the sheer intentionality of the composition. The animals are not placed randomly. They follow the natural curves of the stone to create a sense of three-dimensional depth. There is a famous scene of a bird-headed man being confronted by a bison, a rare and cryptic narrative that suggests a shamanic story we may never truly decode. By the time the pyramids were rising in Egypt, the masterpieces of Lascaux had already been hidden in total darkness for over 12,000 years. They remind us that the human need to create grand-scale art is far older than civilization itself. 7. The Shigir Idol, circa 11,500 to 12,000 years ago. While most of the art that survives from prehistory is made of stone or clay, our next mystery is made of wood. Discovered in a peat bog in the Ural Mountains of Russia, the Shigir Idol is the oldest wooden sculpture in the world. It was carved from a freshly cut larch tree shortly after the end of the last ice age, making it twice as old as the pyramids and even older than the first stone circles of Göbekli Tepe. Standing originally over 15 feet tall, the idol is covered from top to bottom in mysterious geometric carvings, zigzags, lines, and crosses. At the very top is a three-dimensional human head, but as you look down the body, you realize there are several other ghostly faces carved into the wood. To the people who made it, these symbols were likely a code, a lost language of myths, gods, or territorial markers. The fact that it survived at all is a miracle. The acidic, oxygen-free environment of the peat bog acted like a time capsule, preserving the wood for over 11 millennia. When we look at the Shigir idol, we see a tradition of monumental wood carving that must have been widespread, though almost all other examples have long since rotted away. It stands as a lonely sentinel from a forest culture that possessed a complex spiritual world we are only beginning to understand. It is a reminder that for every stone monument we find, there were likely 1,000 wooden wonders that have returned to the earth. 8. The Jericho plastered skulls, circa 9,000 to 8,000 years ago. We travel now to the Jordan Valley, to the ancient city of Jericho. Long before its famous walls were built, this was a settlement of the Natufian and early Neolithic peoples. Around 9,000 years ago, 4 millennia before the pyramids, the inhabitants of Jericho practiced a hauntingly beautiful form of art. They modeled lifelike human faces over the actual skulls of their ancestors. These plastered skulls are among the world's first true portraits. After a person died, their skull was removed and covered in fine plaster, which was then sculpted to recreate the features of the living. Shells were often placed in the eye sockets to give the face a piercing, lifelike gaze, and traces of paint suggest they were decorated with facial hair or tattoos. These were not objects of macabre fascination, but of deep reverence. They were likely kept in homes, allowing families to remain in the presence of their living ancestors. It is the birth of the cult of the individual. In these faces, we see the first attempt to defeat death through art, to preserve the likeness of a loved one forever. By the time the Egyptian embalmers were perfecting mummification, the people of Jericho had already been preserving their dead through sculpture for thousands of years. They connect us to the universal human desire to be remembered. 9. The Cueva de las Manos, Cave of the Hands, circa 13,000 to 9,000 years ago. In the rugged canyon of the Pinturas River in Patagonia, Argentina, lies a site that feels more personal than any other on our list. The Cueva de las Manos features a wall covered in hundreds of stenciled handprints, layered over one another in vibrant shades of red, ochre, and violet. These prints were made by placing a hand against the rock and blowing pigment over it through a bone pipe. Most of the prints are of left hands, suggesting the artists held the pipe in their right. There are hands of men, women, and children. When you look at this wall, you aren't looking at a distant, abstract God. You are looking at a high five from the deep past. It is an incredibly human gesture, a way of saying, I was here. This is my mark. The cave also features scenes of hunting the guanaco, a wild relative of the llama, showing the deep connection between the people and the animals that sustained them. By the time the first stones were quarried for the Giza plateau, these hands had already been reaching out from the rock for 9,000 years. They represent the universal human urge to leave a trace of ourselves behind, a physical echo of a life lived in the wild beauty of the ancient world. 10. The Ain Ghazal statues, circa 9,000 years ago. Our final mystery takes us to the outskirts of modern-day Amman, Jordan. In the Neolithic village of Ain Ghazal, archaeologists discovered 2 pits containing 32 extraordinary statues. Created around 9,000 years ago, these are the oldest large-scale representations of the human form ever found. Standing up to 3 feet tall, the statues are made of lime plaster molded over bundles of reeds. They are strangely haunting, with elongated necks and massive, wide eyes outlined in bitumen. Their bodies are flat and stylized, but their faces possess an intense, almost alien individuality. Some have 2 heads, a mystery that suggests a belief in twins, duality, or perhaps a 2-headed deity. These statues were not meant to be seen by the public. They were carefully buried in a ritual grave, perhaps after they had served their religious purpose. They represent the moment humans stopped being mere hunters and started seeing themselves as something distinct and powerful, beings worthy of being carved in stone and plaster. They were the ancestors of the giant statues of the pharaohs, created 5,000 years before the first Egyptian king was even born. In their wide, staring eyes, we see the first spark of the monumental human art that would eventually dominate the world. As we return from the deep silence of these ancient places, we find ourselves back in the present, though perhaps a little changed. We have seen that the human spirit did not begin with the pyramids, nor did it begin with the invention of the city. It began in the dark of a Swabian cave, in the palm of a hand holding a tiny stone figurine, and in the breath of an artist blowing pigment over their own hand in Patagonia. These 10 masterpieces are more than just archaeological finds. They are the primary documents of our species. They tell us that even in the harshest ice ages, we found the time to carve mammoth ivory into myths. They tell us that before we knew how to write, we knew how to paint the movement of a charging bull. They remind us that the ancient world is much deeper and much more mysterious than we often imagine. By the time the Great Pyramid of Giza was completed, the Lion Man was already 35,000 years old. The handprints of Patagonia had already been fading for 9 millennia. We are part of a very long, very beautiful lineage of creators. As you drift off to sleep tonight, carry these images with you. Think of the millions of hands that came before yours, the eyes that watched the same stars, and the hearts that felt the same urge to make something beautiful out of the raw materials of the earth. May your dreams be as vast as the tundra and as rich as the painted caves. You are a descendant of dreamers, a child of a story that is 40,000 years in the making. Sleep well, dear friends, and find peace in the deep, enduring history of our shared human soul. Good night.